Videos. Today we're doing 2 college football player props here on PrizePicks for Saturday, September 7th. Before I get started, link in the description below of this video. Hop into the premium Discord, $9.30 per month, 31 cents per day is what it comes down to. So where I post all the plays I'm making on PrizePicks. We also have other captors in there as well, posting all of their plays. It's a super positive community overall. Everyone in the Discord is trying to help each other cash. So again, link in the description below for that. Also, stay to the end of the video. I'm talking about Daily Grind Fantasy. It is a research betting tool that I do use every single day. I'll be talking about that at the end of the video. We're going to be taking some plays from that platform. Again, link in the description. Get a 25% off your first month with Daily Grind. But nonetheless, you guys, 2 player props that I do like from this Saturday, September 7th slate. Really a massive Saturday college football slate, you guys. Just games, big matchups all across the day. And again, for this video, both these plays are going to be from games later in the day. So again, if you're watching this video Saturday morning, even Saturday early afternoon, both these games will have not yet started yet. I think the earliest game from both these plays is going to be 4:30 Pacific time. So you got all day if you're watching this video to get in on these plays if you do like them as well. But nonetheless, let's get into it. The first play I'm going to take here is going to be Shedeur Sanders. I just love the spot here. I think it's a buy low for him here at 22.5 fantasy score. Both these plays are going to be fantasy score props, by the way. But Shedeur Sanders, 22.5 fantasy score. I like the over on this one. Colorado, Nebraska. This is a massive game, rivalry game. Like, I think one of the oldest college football rivalries in the country. And for Shedeur Sanders, Colorado, 56.5 over under, and Nebraska is going to be 5-point favorites in this one. So taking Shedeur Sanders on the road as a 6-point underdog, loving him to throw the ball a ton in this one. I think, given the Colorado offense and how bad their defense is, they're going to be in high-scoring games all season long. Like, their defense can't really stop anyone, and going back to even last season, we saw the same thing. But Shedeur Sanders, he faced Nebraska last season at home, and in that game, he finished with 30.7 fantasy points, went 31 for 42, 393 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and also had minus 30 rushing yards because, again, the sacks equate to negative yards in college football, but he did have a rushing TD as well. So pretty much just with the passing, he finished with 30.7 fantasy points, and that includes another minus 3 points, essentially, he was hit with those rushing stats. So a very solid floor at 22.5 fantasy points for Shedeur Sanders. Going back, over his going back to last season, he hit the over on this line in 6 of 11 to start the year against North Dakota State. Went for 34.5 fantasy points, and actually, I think the first college football video of the season that I just made, for this, I think it was Colorado North Dakota State. I took Shedeur Sanders over pass yards goblin, and he hammered that line because their offense generated or essentially acquired. They might have the best wide receiver room in the country. Travis Hunter obviously is going to be a first-round pick. Jimmy Horn went for 195 yards in week 1. DeJounte Wester, obviously another massive player, like an ex-wide receiver at FAU last season, was first-team All-AAC, and then Will Shepard was a wide receiver 1 at Vanderbilt. So again, Amarion Miller as well was a 5-star recruit. Best wide receiver room, I think, in the conference, in my opinion. It just allows Shedeur Sanders to move the ball all over the field. That's the reason why he had a 76.5% pass completion percentage in week 1, going for 445 yards. I just think, again, another narrative that I do like is the weather's going to be good in this one. We saw Shedeur in week 1, like I said, go for 41.5 fantasy with not great weather, cold, rainy. It was windy as well. Weather here in Lincoln, Nebraska for Saturday is going to be mainly sunny, high with 5 to 10 mile per hour winds. So should be really great weather for Shedeur Sanders to operate. But also narrative here that, again, should not go underlooked. We know how Deion Sanders, Colorado, we know how they operate. Motivation, right? People, they're just in the spotlight a ton. And a recent linebacker for Nebraska came out and said, don't compare Shedeur Sanders to Dylan Raiola. You can't compare, you can see here's the quote, you can't compare Dylan to Shedeur. Don't do that. Dylan is a different man. Dylan is a dog. You'll see Saturday. So obviously, Shedeur, Deion, the entire Colorado team see this. I think they're going to really try to pour it on Nebraska if the game, does get to that point. But nonetheless, I think Shedeur has a massive game. And if obviously Colorado being 6.5-point favorite or road underdogs, Colorado's going to be throwing a ton. I think Nebraska will be able to score pretty easily on Colorado. Just gives Shedeur a great floor here. I like this spot a lot at 22.5. I don't think we'll see his fantasy score this low the rest of the season, in my opinion. Again, he literally has 4 wide receiver 1s to throw to. So Shedeur Sanders, the first play. The second play is going to be another quarterback. It's going to be from a late game. It's going to be John Mateer, quarterback for Washington State. Okay, he's a relatively unknown player, right? last season sat behind Cam Ward. Cam Ward transferred to University of Miami. Now John Mateer is the starter. Now, we take a look at this one. This has the highest over-runner on the slate, or maybe one of the highest over-runners on the slate, and maybe one of the highest game totals we'll see all season in college football. 66.5 with a 1.5 point spread. I think both these teams are just going to be scoring at will, moving the ball down the field. And again, this line for a player, think about this, a player that is relatively unknown, really his like third game as a college football starter, and his line is at 24.5. His pass TDs is at 2.5. So that kind of gives you an idea what Vegas is projecting and what Vegas kind of sees for this game. His Goblin line is at 250. So again, the books obviously expecting this to be a shootout, a 66.5 point game total with a 1.5 point spread. We look at John Mateer, week 1. He only threw the ball 17 times against Portland State, obviously not the same matchup at all. He threw the ball 17 times, 352 yards and 5 touchdowns. Also had 2 carries for 55 rushing yards and a touchdown. Went absolutely crazy. 55.6 fantasy points for John Mateer. And like I said, even going back to last season, I think he played like minimal in games that he did see significant stats. I mean, rushing upside seems to be there. He had 3 rushing touchdowns last season, obviously in limited snaps. And then again, in the only game he saw 20 plus snaps, he had 19.8 fantasy points. So he seems to be able to just rack up these fantasy points pretty easily. In that game, 7 for 8, 148 yards and 2 touchdowns, another 3 carries for 19 yards. Like his fantasy score upside to me is extremely high. Now, looking again at this matchup against Texas Tech, both these offenses are very similar air raid offenses. You can even see here Cougars' familiar play style will help the defense against Texas Tech, right? Both of these teams run the air raid offense, right? Obviously, coach trained under their offensive coordinator, so there's very similar playbooks. Both these teams love to throw the football. But think about this for a second. If you're looking at this play, Texas Tech played Abilene Christian last week in week 1 of this season at home. 52-51 score, massive game total, right? Over 100 points scored between both teams. Look at the quarterback for Abilene Christian, 506 yards and 3 touchdowns. He went absolutely crazy. 506 yards and 3 touchdowns. Maverick McIvor. Sorry for pronouncing that name. Maverick McIvor. It's not even going to show what he had in fantasy score because it's not even on RotoWire. But he went for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns against Texas Tech. Texas Tech QB Baron Morton had 378 and 5 touchdowns. Like, if this was the game total for Abilene Christian versus Texas Tech, I mean, the sky is the limit here, in my opinion, for Washington State versus Texas Tech, right? It's crazy that we're getting this line at 24.5. I think it probably will bump up. I will play this line. I will play both these lines. I'll play Shedeur to 23.5, and I'll play John Mateer up to 25.5. Like, if these both bump up 1 point, I'll play both of them. And even if you go back to last season in games where Texas Tech were in essential shootouts, Josh Hoover, 353 yards and a touchdown. Donovan Smith, 336, 4 touchdowns. Bo Nix, 359, 2 touchdowns, 46 yards on the ground. Like, quarterbacks specifically were able to absolutely go crazy against Texas Tech. And again, I think their defense is even worse this season. Love this spot here for John Mateer. Again, we'll play both these lines at bumps 23.5 and 25.5. Now, going back to Daily Grind Fantasy, you guys, research betting platform that I do use every single day, they have the DFS optimizer, which essentially takes the lines from every major sports book, combines them into and calculates it here and gives you a percentage odds to hit. Currently on the college football slate, Luke Haas, I think he's maybe a tight end for Arkansas, over 2.5 receptions is the highest odds to hit, given it's minus 135 on Bovada. But again, some of these other plays, like for example, aren't on every other sports book. If you take a look at Jamal Haynes, 85.5 rushing yards, 53.56 odds to hit, because it's listed at 89.5 on FanDuel. So you get a 4-point discrepancy that essentially Daily Grind Fantasy does all the work for you. Again, link in the description. You guys can get a 7-day free trial with Daily Grind. It is, again, a research betting tool that I do use daily. So again, college football, Saturday, September 7th, 2 player props, Shedeur over 22.5 fantasy, John Mateer over 24.5. Would play both these at 1 point bumps. Please drop a like on this video, hit that subscribe button, and as always, let's cash.